me great pleasure to introduce Matt Stevens, who is the Community and Media Relations Manager for the Sonoma-Marin Area Rail Transit Smart District. Matt has been designing and facilitating smart community outreach programs since 2001. Matt holds an MA in organizational psychology, and besides working for SMART as an outreach consultant, Matt has a successful Bay Area consulting practice in stakeholder-driven organization and strategy development from 1990 to July 2012, when he was hired full-time by SMART. In his spare time, Matt plays bass in 2 Sebastopol rock bands, backpacks in remote backcountry mountains, and owns and operates a relic fishing resort in northern Idaho. Matt is the father of 2 grown children and has lived in Sebastopol for 34 years. Please join me in a warm Sebastopol sunrise welcome.
It's a real pleasure to be here, and I do speak to Rotary clubs on a pretty regular basis, and I'm going to give you the award of the most lively Rotary activity. Definitely a lively Rotary club. I appreciate that. So, I'm afraid to touch this, actually. Sorry. So, here we go. Maybe that's it. What I've got is some photographs. While he's working on the technology, let me give you a little preview of what I plan to talk about this morning. I created a new PowerPoint this week. Every 6 months or so, I have to kind of refresh my message and refresh what's happening, because we are making so much progress in the smart district in terms of building the railroad, the civil infrastructure for the railroad. Our trains are arriving actually in March, our first 2-car pilot set, and so we've got a lot of work to get done before those trains can come onto our property in terms of building the tracks, getting all the systems infrastructure in. And so what I was going to do this morning is talk about that and show you some photographs of what it looks like from Sebastopol to Santa Rosa. We're getting close.
This would have been
Linda.
I could have brought a guitar.
Linda.
I could have done that while I was
Linda.
with the department. So if you hit the slideshow right here, like that, and then actually, you know what? And right at the beginning, there you go. Awesome. So I'm going to turn them off. I'm going to start over again. Show. Okay. Now, all right. Now, this one. Got it. Good morning, everybody. You guys probably know that this is the most lively Rotary club I've I always start the presentations off with a map and cast, because this is not the first time that passenger trains will have run in the North Bay. In fact, before there was a Highway 101, in fact, before there was a Redwood Highway, there was a railroad system that was in place. We had electric interurbans that came to Sebastopol, that ran out to Monterey, Guerneville. There was trains that went to Cascaro, of all places. In Marin County, the trains went out to Point Reyes. Pretty much the entire transportation network in the North Bay was based on trains until the 1930s or so. And this is a map that shows the network in the early part of the 20th century. It's just a lot of train tracks. These are some photographs of some of the stations, some of which still exist. This is actually downtown. This is downtown Santa Fe. This is now the whistle stop. That's the former train station. And this is about where the platform is. This is downtown Santa Rosa, where this is the visitor center in Santa Rosa. Downtown Petaluma. All these buildings still exist, and they're actually repurposed, generally to be a visitor center by the local communities that they're in. This is the ferry terminal at Sausalito. And while there's not a ferry terminal in Sebastopol anymore, there is a ferry terminal in Larkspur. And we will be getting to Larkspur, well, hopefully sooner than later. We have most of the funding to get there. Anybody has a spare $20 million, I'd be happy to receive that for SMART, and we could actually finish the project down to Larkspur. A little bit of history about the SMART project. We're utilizing a historic railroad that was built in the 1860s. There was a number of different railroad operators back then. They all kind of eventually became Southern Pacific. And Southern Pacific was getting out of the freight business in the 70s, and they put the rail corridor up for sale. Around the country, most of the rail corridors were put up for sale in the backyards. In Sonoma County and Marin County, our elected officials of that era had a vision, and they were really truly visionaries, in my opinion, that we may want to run trains again someday. And so they worked together with the Golden Gate Bridge District, and they purchased the rail corridor from Healdsburg, about where Bear Republic is now, down to Larkspur, actually past Larkspur, down to Corte Madera, and then out to Sonoma, actually past Sonoma a little ways in Napa County. And that's now what is the SMART, the streets tracks. There were some early studies done in the 1990s that examined the feasibility of reestablishing passenger rail service in a changing North Bay environment. The change primarily was about growth and jobs. And those feasibility studies actually indicated that the passenger rail service would be a very feasible and viable part of a multimodal transportation mix. The SMART District was created in 2002 by then something like Joe Nation. The SMART District is a state agency, a state-created agency, and that agency has the authority to put a sales tax measure on the ballot, which we did in 2006 and 2008. In 2006, we missed it just by a couple thousand votes. It was a very close vote. If anybody knows, when you do a sales tax measure, you have to actually pass it by a 2/3 majority, which is a Mount Everest type of a hurdle that you have to get over. The SMART board in 2006 felt it was a mandate for the voters for the project, but we got like 65.5% yes vote. We put it back in the ballot in 2008 and won it with a nearly 70% yes vote. So we did that. So it is a taxpayer-supported project, tax 40%. What that equals is about for every $100 you spend, an extra 25 cents is tacked on to the SMART train. Initial operating segment. Does anybody remember what happened in 2008, also besides the election of Obama and the passenger measure Q? Who was our financial advisor? Maybe that person. Tell us about it, yeah.
He left.
Anyway, obviously the economy started to tank, and along with everybody else, the SMART District's sales tax revenues weren't what we anticipated, and the SMART board had to rethink how to deliver the project given the financial and sort of constraints we found ourselves in. So the SMART board decided to phase the project into 2 phases, and they picked the first phase of Santa Rosa to Santa Fe, which is a very good phase because it captures about 80% of the total ridership of the project anyway. And we've expanded this first phase twice now since we started construction, because our construction bids came in. The good news with the economy is that construction bids came in lower also. And so we're able to expand the project from downtown Santa Rosa to Gurney Road with the help of our regional funding partner, local and regional funding partners. We were able to extend the track again up to Airport Boulevard, so I had a station there. So we currently have 10 stations serving basically Airport Boulevard to downtown Santa Fe. We are close to getting all the funding to get to Larkspur, so we're confident that we'll be able to do that. Probably within the first phase, if not the first phase, very shortly thereafter. We anticipate starting up rail service by the end of 2016, which is, for us anyway, I know it's going to take a long time still, but for us, it's like we're going, oh my God. End of 2016, we've got a lot of work to do, so we're doing it. I want to share with you some of those, what we're doing in the next couple more slides. Station platforms. I was showing you stations earlier, and we're not using those buildings anymore. I often get asked, will you reuse the historic rail stations? And the answer is no. All we need is a platform, and that's kind of the human train interface. On the platform, there'll be some seating, some weather protection, and near the platform will be a ticket vending machine. So we have I'm not going to read these. Basically, we've got 3 stations in Santa Rosa, Station Werner Park, in Utah, downtown Petaluma, 2 stations in Novato, near Fireman's Fund at Atherton and San Marin, and Hamilton, just south of Novato, just north of Main Gate Road, and 2 stations in San Rafael, at the Civic Center, and in downtown San Rafael. For the stations not being served by this train in the first phase, that would be Cloverdale, Healdsburg, Windsor, and technically right now Larkspur. We're proposing to provide express bus service that mimics the train. It'll have a similar type of schedule, and it will pick up people. So for example, in Cloverdale, there's a train station there already, and I people think that's a smart station, but actually it's a Caltrain station. When they did the bypass in Cloverdale, they took out the old historic station there, where they had to do for the freeway, and they had to replace that station as a mitigation. And so that station has been sitting there since 1995, waiting for the smart train. So in phase 1, you can drive your car to the station there and park it and pick up an express bus that will take you to pick up people in Healdsburg, Windsor, and then take you to the Airport Boulevard station where you can catch the train. Is that right? Yeah, okay. Rail manufacturing. This is a new PowerPoint presentation I just recently put together, so I'm still kind of learning it. This is our rail vehicle right here. It's actually probably in Colorado right now. I don't have any photographs from that, but we call them the pilot cars. And they're in Colorado right now at the National Test Train Track being for high-speed testing. That will happen probably until maybe mid-December, and they'll go back to Rochelle, Illinois, where it was assembled, and for some final testing and training. We're sending some people there to be trained on how to drive these things. And then it's going to be coming back out to California probably by the end of March. These are some photographs of various states of construction. This is the engine right here. Here it's being tested. This is static test station here. This is the pilot's cab. Now, we don't have to turn these trains around. They're the 2-car trains that are mirror images of each other. So when the train gets from Santa Rosa to San Rafael, the operator will basically walk to the other end of the train and then drive the train from that end. And this is actually a photograph of, it's the same train, but it looks a little different color. And a rail operator in Toronto, Canada, actually purchased some of our trains. We had options for these trains, and they purchased some of our options because they wanted this train as well. And they were ready for it, and we weren't, because we're still doing all the civil construction work for the train. So they actually received the first ones, but we've been tracking their progress, and this is a photograph of the train right here, so you can see what it looks like. Each 2-car train set will hold about 158 people seated and 160 people standing. And depending on how many, if there's wheelchair users or not, space for about 12 bicycles per train car, so 24 bicycles per 2-car train set. And actually, before I go on, I want to point out 2 other things. This is our ADA compliant bathroom. And where the ADA compliant bathroom would be in the other train, you're going to have a service bar. And probably you could exchange the word service for wine. So people can probably get your beverage of choice on the way home, maybe coffee in the morning. So this would be a full-service train. Bike train synergy. This is one of my favorite aspects of the project. Because we're going to have room for 24 bicycles per 2-car train set, we're really encouraging people to consider riding their bicycles to work. You can ride your bike to the train, put your bike on the train, and then when you get to your destination station, you can actually ride your bicycle to where you're going to. And this actually helps solve what we call the last mile problem. And this is true for all rail transit, because trains are basically a fixed route service. When you get to your destination station, how do you get to your place of employment or wherever you're intending to go? We call the last mile problem. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution for that last mile problem. We're working with the local bus operators to rejigger their schedules and routes to work with them, basically work effectively together to make sure we get people to their destination, walking, cycling, The large employment centers are sort of working together to create an employer-driven shuttle system. So, for example, Keystone, what's DC Agilent? Keysight, thank you. Working with Kaiser Permanente in Santa Rosa to do an employer shuttle service. In San Rafael, Fireman's Fund, Buck Center, and Birkenstocks are working together to do shuttle service. And so these are examples of the kind of ways people will get to their destination from the train. We're also building a bicycle path adjacent to the tracks for most of it. Like the rail project, it was phased as well because of the economy. We've got 7 bicycle path segments in the current construction contract, and these are those segments. We've got 3 in Sonoma County and 4 in Marin County. We've got some segments that are already constructed. In Marin County, from Centerville to Larkspur has been constructed. In Santa Rosa, 8th Street to College has been constructed. We have several other segments that are actually under environmental review, and as soon as we get that, then we'll be building those as well. One of the issues we have with the bike path is it's like building a road. And what we've discovered as we rebuild the tracks is that every little ditch where there might be some water sometimes of the year is often considered a wetland by the varying agencies that basically care for such things. And so we have to do a lot of environmental review work to make sure we can actually build the bike path where we want to. The next few slides are kind of some things I'm really proud about. SMART is actually very keen on sustainability. We've focused on obtaining all of our materials as locally as possible. The rail is manufactured in Pueblo, Colorado, not China. The concrete ties are manufactured in Spokane, Washington. The ballast is produced right here in Sonoma County out near Forestville and Canyon Rock. The new rail all has a majority recycled steel content to it, and everything is being shipped by train, which basically 1 ton of freight can be shipped nearly 500 miles in 1 gallon of fuel by train. And so so it's not just the right thing to do, it's also the most cost-effective thing to do. We've also purchased a used bridge in Galveston, Texas. We have to replace something called the Haystack Bridge in Petaluma. It goes over the Petaluma River. It's an old turntable bridge. And to remanufacture or rebuild the turntable mechanism and rebuild that bridge was going to cost about $20 million. And it was going to give us about 10 years of lifespan. And one of our engineers saw an article about this bridge in Galveston that was being basically demolished because the Coast Guard wanted to widen the channel. And it was a new bridge, like it was 10 years old. And so they suggested, we called Galveston and said, could we buy your bridge? They turned out to be quite happy to sell us their bridge. So we bought the bridge for, I think it was $4.6 million. And that included disassembly and shipping up here. We're having that refurbished, painted, mechanisms, the mechanicals rebuilt. And the whole thing is going to cost $20 million to get it installed. So it's the same price, but we're getting about an 80-year lifespan out of that. So it's a much better deal for us. And actually, it's a much better deal for the taxpayers. That's what we really work for. So now we're going to get to the part where I'm going to kind of flip through it pretty quickly. But construction projects to date, I want to just hit some highlights here. We've got about 86.5 miles of track rebuild. We have 43 to do, so we still have a few more miles of track to rebuild. We've rebuilt 36 grade crossings. That's a railroad crossing where the tracks and the road meet. Has anybody driven over the railroad crossings in Sonoma County and Santa Rosa lately? Huge improvement, right? Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And we're getting it rebuilt now in Marin County as well. We've got the station platforms at 9 stations, the foundation stem walls built. And this is some information I'm really proud of too, which is that over half of the subcontractors are local subcontractors. And we put about $20 million back into the local economy. This is not counting this is not labor hours. This is like just services, hotels, ballast, materials, that type of thing. And so we really like to think of SMART as a local economic stimulus project. We're doing everything we can to put as much money and hire as much local service and labor as possible in the local economy. So this is a tour now from downtown Santa Fe to Airport Boulevard. I'm going to kind of go quickly through it because there's just a lot of work going on now, and so this is a sort of a slide, a series of slides to show that work. This is downtown Santa Fe. Before we could rebuild the tracks, we had to do some utility relocation work. One of the things we've done with the local municipalities is that when we are doing work that their utility facilities intersect somehow with, they've taken advantage of this opportunity to basically upgrade their system. So for example, in Santa Rosa, our contractor did some sewer relocation work in Santa Rosa for them. It's cheaper to do it when you're tearing the tracks out, you know, than to have to tear the tracks out a second time to do the work, say 5 years or 10 years from now. So the local municipalities have been taking advantage of our work to do some of their work. They've actually hired our contractors to do that work for them. So right now in Santa Fe, they're doing some sewer or utility relocation work. They're moving the old track here. This is one of the platform foundations and stem walls in downtown Santa Fe. This is the Portosello Tunnel. This is the tunnel that we're rehabilitating just north of downtown Santa Fe. A lot of bridges, so you can see some photographs of bridges here. But, you know, the tracks were built originally in the 1800s, so were all the bridges. And so we had to evaluate every one of those bridges to see what condition it was in. Some we could repair, rehabilitate, some we had to replace. And the Greens Creek Bridge is one that we're replacing. And here they're driving piles. This is a pile driver right here. They're having piles that they basically post to put the bridge on. This is the platform that Atherton Center in by Fireman's Fund. This is the stem wall and foundation for the platform there. This is a retaining wall. We've had to, you know, basically reinforce a lot of the earthwork around the track to prevent erosion. Here's some track work near the Ignacio Y. This is where the tracks go off Highway 37, more or less, out to the national system, actually. Our train tracks do connect to the national system. Nevada Creek Bridge. This was an interesting project. They actually had to dam the Nevada Creek. So they put in this big bladder right here, and it's called a bladder dam. And they basically back up the water so they could do the work just on the side of the dam. Here they're driving piles from Nevada Creek, putting in new steel girders. That's the finished bridge right there. San Antonio Creek, they're basically cutting pile. So they basically drive the pile up and they put up the specifications. And then what they do is they put something called vent caps on the piles right here. So these are basically placed on the piles, and they'll basically put the concrete platform, I guess, so they put it, where they can put valves from the rail on. Here's the Haystack Bridge. They're painting the steel girders. The Haystack Bridge is a big project. What they're doing is they're having to drill, they're called drill piles. So they're drilling 80-foot holes that are 6 feet wide, and they're dropping in these big wire cages right here, and then they're putting concrete in that. So they're concrete piles. Here's your drilling a pile hole right there, and that's a concrete pile that's already been drilled and filled right there. Signal work, one of the biggest parts of the project, besides the bridges and all the civil work, is putting in the systems. Our trains we're going to be one of 2 first train operators to use what's called positive train control. About 7 or 8 years ago, there was a serious accident in Los Angeles with Metrolinx where a train driver, I think he was texting actually, ran into the train. And so the Federal Railroad Administration has mandated the basis of that accident, something called positive train control. That is where the dispatch center can actually control the train. And so it requires a lot of systems to be put in place to do that. And so we're installing a fiber optic conduit all along the tracks. So we're using fiber optic to control this system, and this is the cable we're putting into this system over here. These are the signal houses. Every grade crossing has all, you know, the gates and the signals and all that. Well, there's a signal house that controls all that. So each crossing has a signal house. There's my favorite redwood tree in California. This tree was planted on the corridor about 45 years ago, and it turned out to be one of the rarest trees in the world. It's a Chimera coast redwood, which means it has 2 sets of genes. One set of genes are for albinoism, the other set of genes are normal photosynthesis. And so it was brought to our attention how important this tree was. And so SMART worked with PG&E, the city of Makati, and our contractor to relocate this tree where it was new house, so new hole in the ground. And here are Makati police station. In fact, we're putting in Makati. So this is what the problem was. We're putting in a set of tracks, a passing side of Makati, and trees in the way of that. This is the finished crossing across the East County Boulevard. And right here, they're doing grading work for the second set of tracks. And this is where the trees are right here. Crossing the Makati. Okay, here we're installing a track just north of River Road and south of River Road. This is the switch, basically, for operation maintenance facility. Our OFF, that's slang for operation maintenance facility, is located at Airport Boulevard, near the airport. This is the switching mechanism. This is the Marquest Creek Bridge. This is a bridge that we actually rehabilitating, not replacing. And but we did have to repaint it. So everything that we're doing has a profound environmental protection aspect. Everything we do is geared towards protecting the environment. So when we repainted this bridge, we actually wrapped it in a tent, so none of the paint could get into the atmosphere. Okay, this is getting on the track and ties installed. This is the Airport Boulevard platform. Okay, this is the first concrete pour for the maintenance building. I've got a few more slides. Bear with me. I'm almost done.
Okay, we're running really short.
Okay. One of the challenges we had is to, when we rebuild the track between Petaluma and Nevada, we go through a lot of wetlands. And we're actually going to destroy about 8 inches of wetlands on each side of the tracks all the way down. We add all that up, it's about 2.5 acres. You have to mitigate that before you can do the project. And so we went and searched for mitigation land to purchase some wetlands somewhere in the Bay Area, and discovered that all of the mitigation lands were pretty much tapped out. And so around that time, the Miramonte Marina on the Sonoma Marine border came up for sale. And it's something that the environmental community has been wanting to restore to its natural state for a long time. And so we took the opportunity to purchase this and use that for our own mitigation bank. And so it also resulted in huge taxpayer savings, because mitigation that's about $2.5 million an acre, and you have to mitigate at about 3.1 acres. So this is $2.5 million for 56 acres. So we basically got a great deal on mitigation. Let's see if I just skip through that. This is an aerial shot of the marina. We're going to basically restore all of this back into a natural wetland. What's next? Basically, our vehicles arrive in March. We have to do about a year's worth of testing. By 2016, you'll be seeing trains running as if it was full service. We call it mock service. We have to get all of our regulatory approvals, and we'll be getting them in service probably by the end of 2016. I'm going to kind of skip through these. This basically tells us our sales tax revenues are on the upswing. That's all good news. We've been able to leverage our sales tax dollars many-fold. We've got $60 million in regional federal funding on the basis of our sales tax. Jobs, we're going to have about 60 people working for SMART when it's all said and done. 80 of those will be in operations. Clipper card, we're using Clipper for our ticketing methodology, which means that you can use a Clipper card to get on the train, get on a bus, get on a ferry. It's just one card, basically it's a reloadable card. You can use to transfers. This is the last thing I wanted to leave you with. This is actually really important, and it's worth the time we're going to take to talk about this, which is building rail safe communities. One of the biggest issues we have is that we haven't had trains operating in the roadway in any meaningful way since 1958. We've got 2 generations of people that don't know how to behave around trains and train tracks. And so in 2012, when I went to work full-time for SMART, we started really focusing on this problem and educating people, starting with kids, teachers, and parents in schools. We delivered about 80,000 pieces of paper to schools, parents, and teachers. Stephanie, by the way, I should introduce Stephanie Cobb. This is my colleague here. She works with me at SMART, and she's been working on the safety issue for a long time. She's a part of something called Safety Pals, and anyway. So building rail-safe communities is something that we just can't do by ourselves. It takes everybody working together to educate people about rail safety. So we depend on people like you to participate in that. Simply just by talking about it with your kids and your neighbors about being safe on the tracks. So I'm going to leave you with two important rail safety tips. One is the only safety place to cross a railroad track has a designated crossing. And that designated crossing is indicated by something called a crosswalk right here. And the other is the traction for trains, not for games, or a place to play, or a shortcut, or a place to live. So, you know, if you see anybody in the track, you should really remind them that it's not okay, it's not safe, it's a very dangerous thing to do. So with that, I'm going to stop. I thank you very much for your time, and I wish you a good day.
I have one thing for you. First, we have a drawing. And ours here. And we're all going to try to do is draw one of those tickets and read the last 4 digits.
Okay, here we go. 1, 3, 3, 6.
Okay, so we'll check this out. 6 cards, one of them an ace. Draw the ace. Give all the money. Okay, so draw one of those cards. It's an ace! Well, is that allowed? Of course. Okay. Half the ball, half the club. Got it. This is the wine here was a gold winner. Our winner. John Leo was one of our members. We bottled this, and this particular bottle polio. Polio. A donation goes with this polio. Thank you very much.
Pleasure not being here.
Now, sorry we ran over. I think I'll skip the joke and do you next week. And you want to hear the joke? All right. Joke.
So a very lucky Rotarian from Sebastopol actually was given 2 wishes by God. 2 wishes by God, lucky Rotarian here in Sebastopol was given 2 wishes. And he said, well, shooting low, he said, well, pleasure, fun-loving guy. He said, well, I like the best bottle of wine in the world, the best woman. Bang! He gets the bottle of award-winning John Paletto Pinot Noir. That's good, right? But right next to Pinot Noir, right next to this lucky fellow was Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa appeared. The moral of the story is be specific. Be specific.